Welcome to RISE's 6th annual Super Bowl Critical Conversation. I'm Tracy Wolfson of CBS Sports, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. RISE is a national nonprofit that uses sport to combat racism and unite diverse communities. RISE educates and empowers athletes, teams, and executives across all sports, equipping them with the necessary skills to be leaders for social justice, racial equity, civic engagement, and inclusion. Each year at the Super Bowl, RISE brings together NFL players for a critical conversation on these issues to discuss the role athletes can play in creating meaningful, lasting change. In 2020, our nation experienced an unprecedented reckoning on race that evoked a renewed wave of athlete activism and civic engagement. Fueled by a global pandemic, a historic election, and outrage over the killings of more unarmed Black men and women, the sports community rallied like never before to drive voter turnout and help ignite a desperately needed national conversation about race, injustice, and inequity. But as we enter 2021, many in the sports community and across the nation are asking, what comes next? How do we address the racial and social disparities that were exposed and amplified by the pandemic? How do we take this moment of heightened awareness about systemic racism, voting rights, and a desire for change and convert it into actionable steps that unify our country and create a more inclusive and equitable society? Athletes have the platform and ability to be leaders for addressing some of these issues, and today we'll speak with some of the top players in the NFL about how they are helping communities address these questions and impact meaningful, lasting change. Our first panel features RISE CEO Diahann Billings-Burford and key members from the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, former NFL MVP Patrick Mahomes, and all-pro safety Tyrann Mathieu, who proved that having success on the field does not stop players from having an even greater impact off it. Diahann, why don't we start with you by you telling us what RISE is all about and what the goal of today's conversations is.
Well, first, let me just thank you, Tracy. One of the things RISE is all about, as you mentioned, is having these really important conversations. And every year for the past 6 years, we've taken advantage of the Super Bowl to have a critical conversation about issues of the day and to bring our country together. And your skill set is allowing us to make this, we believe, one of the most productive conversations we had to date. So I want to thank you at the top for being willing to do this. You laid out so well what RISE is. The one thing I would add is we have this bold vision. When you enter into our offices, we talk about creating a nation unified through sport, committed to racial equity and social justice. And that's what we are. That's what we do every day. And so we educate the sports community at large. We empower the sports community at large to help create that vision because we believe that it can happen. We've been doing this for 5 years now, officially. We're not new to this. We feel like in many ways we were prepared for 2020. We've been focused on these issues. We've been mastering what we do. We've been honing our skills. And so we're here educating, equipping, and pushing folks to have these really difficult but really productive conversations and then take actions that will make our country better.
Well, this past year, athletes have been more engaged in addressing racism, social injustice, and voting rights than ever before. Patrick, what has inspired you to be more vocal and active as leaders for change this past year?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. I think first off, just being tired of it. I think being tired of seeing the constant social injustices happening around the United States and the world, and then tired of just being quiet and it keep happening over and over again. That as well as other people like Tyrann and other athletes that have kind of stepped up, I realized that I need to use my voice, use my platform that I've been given to make change in this world. And I think that you've seen that with athletes this year is we have such a great platform and we're able to be role models to a lot of people. And we want to make sure that we're being the right role models and making a change in the world and making it a better place when we leave it.
Tyrann, what has inspired you?
Well, I think the biggest thing that really inspired me this past year was really community. Whether that be the Kansas City community or my community back home, New Orleans, Louisiana. I think it's all about community. It's all about bringing people together, being positive, shedding positive light. And I feel like I have the perfect platform, to do that. It's a lot of young people that follow me, a lot of older people as well. And I'm just in a perfect position to really kind of shed some positivity, to all of those people in my community.
Well, Diahann, RISE works with players, teams, and leagues to combat racism and inspire civic engagement. What is RISE's role in making sure that athletes and teams have the desired impact in making a real difference in this space?
We see it as our role is just to educate and empower, right? It's to equip them to use their considerable platforms, figure out what they're passionate about, and then take real action that has an impact. And so I'm excited to say this year, right, with the NFL, we've done quite a bit in addition to the voter education trainings, which we did with 12 of the teams. And I'm not saying anybody's team did better than anybody else, but I am saying these two guys, I am so thankful to you. We literally did one session. It was all them saying this is something they were passionate about. That led to PSAs, that led to so many people seeing things online and so much increased involvement. And so we think our role is, and we get at empowering folks by educating, putting tools in their hands. And then when they say they want to do more, RISE is there to help. Okay, this is how we take those actionable steps. Here's what's going to have an impact. We think that the organizations and the athletes are set up to do what they do best. And so we just want to be here to provide what we do best so we can get at it and make a change.
Diahann, you're right. It has been incredible to see. We have not seen athletes make civic engagement and voting a focus of activism as much as we have this past year. The NFL launched their own NFL Votes initiative to inspire voter participation. Patrick, you helped turn Arrowhead Stadium into a polling location on Election Day. You and Tyrann both worked with RISE to create a voter playbook PSA so fans knew how to vote, and helped RISE lead a voter education and registration session with your team. Patrick, why is it important for the sports community as a whole to continue leading on issues of voting rights and civic engagement beyond what we saw in 2020?
Yeah, because you have to continue the fight. I think that's the biggest thing. The presidential elections is a huge part in our nation, and everybody really takes notice in. But all the local elections and stuff like that happen, every few years and every couple of years. And so for me, it's to continue to bring this to the forefront, bring this attention that it deserves, because it makes impacts in our lives every single day. And we want to make sure that we can use our voice that our ancestors fought for and fought hard for, and we don't want to let that be to waste. And we want to make sure that we continue to battle and continue to get better and better every single year.
Diahann, I love what he said. Continue the fight. Why is that so important to continue this fight past 2020?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, I love the way you guys kind of framed why you did this. I think it's important to continue increased engagement because we are going to continue to have injustices if we don't decide that we're going to take part in democracy, right? If we don't decide, if we don't take part in like who represents us, who makes laws, who makes decisions, we're going to continue to have the injustices. And to Tyrann's point about community, right? Like we can't stop here because community doesn't stop, right? Every single need we have in our community, every single joy we have in our community, the good folks, the bad folks, it's not stopping, right? And so we can't stop. And so this needs to be like a jumping off point, but there's more to be done and more to celebrate. I also think it's really important to say that a lot of folks stepped up and that stepping up had a really positive impact. I think as a parent of folks who are young but old enough to vote, to me, it's wonderful that much of that population is involved. in our country, in their democracy, they feel like it's their community. So, I think we got to keep going because community doesn't stop. And if we want the injustices to stop, then we got to keep going.
I couldn't agree more. Patrick, Tyrann, you both worked with RISE throughout the season to become better educated on these issues and more empowered to take effective action to address racial inequity. We mentioned the work you did together around voting, and RISE also led anti-racism and unconscious bias trainings for your entire organization. Patrick, what has been most valuable, though, about this partnership?
I think just giving us the resources that we need to make sure that we can continue to use our platform. I know for me, I mean, just one little example, I thought I was already registered to vote. I had done the registration forms, I had done everything, and I had sent it in just how it had told me to send in. And I ended up going to the wrong county, and because it was sent to the wrong county, they didn't notify me. They just kind of threw it out and didn't let me have my registration form. And so, as someone who thought he had taken care of business, when I came to RISE and they showed us the different resources to make sure that you're registered, I went and looked and realized I had to redo everything. And I was able to do that and be able to use my voice in that way. And I think those resources that they have at RISE can continue to help me build my platform and help me use my platform to make sure everyone can use their voice and they can be heard.
Tyrann, how about you? What have you learned about how to effectively address issues of racism, inequity, and civil engagement?
Well, it's been a blessing to really, have the commitment of the RISE program. They've really given us a lot of resources and a lot of tools so that we're able to kind of go back into our communities and speak the right language, speak the right way, speak positive, be positive, teach people how to adapt. I think sports is like a big driver of change, right? And a lot of people are inspired by sports. And I think if we could continue to lead from a place of leadership and peace, I think we'll continue to make strides and gain, the ground back that we all feel like we're losing.
Well, speaking of being a driver for change, you played, Tyrann, an important role in getting NFL players together to create the now famous video pushing the league to condemn systemic racism, support player activism, and admit it was too slow in doing so. What impact do you think that video had and will have going forward as the league and players continue the fight for social justice?
Well, I will hope that, it has great, positive, impact. When I look at the NFL, I look at us as a brotherhood. I look at us as one body, even though we compete against each other, each and every week. I truly believe we're one family, with one true goal. Obviously, everybody wants to win Super Bowls, but everybody wants to be leaders, in their communities. So for me, I was most proud of, all the guys stepping up, speaking for their teams, for their communities. And I'm pretty sure that we all were heard, but it was a blessing that we all could come together and show the whole world how united, and bonded, we truly are.
You mentioned something, leaders of their communities. Well, Patrick, LeBron James has been an active leader for voting rights and social justice while winning an NBA title this year. Naomi Osaka used her platform to speak out against police brutality while winning the US Open. You guys are defending Super Bowl champs. We're the #1 seed in the AFC and also continue to engage on these off-field issues. What does this say about how athletes can balance their success on the field and still have a powerful impact off the field?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we're truly blessed to be in this position that we're in, to be able to come here every single day and play the sport that we love and get to compete at the highest level. And with that, we get these opportunities, and we get these opportunities to be a part of this community and to use our voice. And I think you see with with LeBron and Naomi that you can go out there and be a part of the community and make change and still be at the top of the game, whatever sport, whatever profession that you're in. And I think it's us to be examples of how to take care of ourselves, our family, our teammates, our friends, but also take care of the community around us. And I think we have a lot of great athletes in this organization and in this league and around the world who understand that and want to make sure that as we continue to perform on the field, we perform off of it as well.
So Diann, what comes next? How do teams, leagues, and athletes keep moving the ball forward and become stronger leaders for racial equity, fair access to voting, and social justice?
Well, I wouldn't be a very good CEO of RISE if I didn't say one of the things that comes next is further education. I do think that, we have to keep equipping ourselves to have these difficult conversations. If we want, like RISE, and like the guys have expressed here, if we want to have these conversations so that we end up more unified, right? If we don't educate ourselves, we're gonna have these conversations and we're gonna end up more separate than together. So I think what comes next is that more education about the issues so that we can have the conversations, and they might be hard, but we need to have them, right? If we're gonna keep moving towards that common good. Some of what comes next, I know that I can't even imagine. I never imagined that we would have places like Arrowhead become voting sites. I never imagined we're part of this Rally the Vote campaign. And we started out with 9 teams and we committed to try to get more teams to come on board. I never imagined that we'd have more than 50 teams across all the leagues come on board and take part. So I think some of what's next I haven't seen yet, and I love that. I love that if these leaders stay invested, there are gonna be things that we haven't even imagined that are gonna happen. But I definitely think we gotta continue to be educated. We gotta figure out what folks are passionate about. Again, I want hats off to you two. I think you're effective because you do what you truly care about. It does not work if folks are doing things that someone else tells them to do. So I think what's next is like tapping into what is your passion, what do you truly care about? And then let's get at it. There's some real action plans. There's some real things that need to be done. And, RISE is here to help folks do them.
Patrick, Tyrann, for you both, what comes next?
Yeah, well, for us as an organization, I know we've really started to look into investing in the Black-owned community, Black-owned businesses in our community. Going through the pandemic that we're in, you don't want to lose these small businesses, and you don't want to lose what makes Kansas City home. And the Kansas City Chiefs Kingdom fan base is so good to us. We want to make sure we invest in the community as well, and making sure that we can get through this together and come out better on the other side.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of what, Ms. Diann said. It's all about community. It's all about educating the people around us. I truly feel like I'm in a position that I'm able to provide certain resources for my community, and it's important for me to stay invested in that. It's important for me to continue to lead not only myself, my family, and my close loved ones, and teach everybody the right way. I'm just grateful for the opportunity not only to work with RISE, but to work with guys like Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, the different guys that's really invested in their communities, really hoping to see great change.
Well, Patrick, Tyrann, Diann, this has just been incredible. It is unfortunately all the time that we have, but thank you so much for your leadership on these issues and for participating in RISE's 6th annual Super Bowl Critical Conversation. Welcome back to part 2 of RISE's 6th annual Super Bowl Critical Conversation. We're excited to be joined next by 3 NFL players who are having an incredible impact in their communities and beyond. 2-time Super Bowl champion Trey Flowers of the Detroit Lions, Pro Bowl safety Justin Simmons of the Denver Broncos, and 4-time Pro Bowler and 2-time All-Pro offensive lineman Andrew Whitworth of the Los Angeles Rams. All 3 of these players have been named their team's nominee for the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award, which is considered the NFL's most prestigious honor bestowed annually during Super Bowl week. Our conversation will focus on the impact these players are having in their communities and how they and their organizations are working to fight racial inequity and advance social justice. Trey, Justin, Andrew, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for
When
having
we
me.
talk about issues of racism and inequity, it's really important to be honest and vulnerable to create a better understanding so we can address these issues head on. I'm gonna start with Diann, and then I want everyone to answer this question. Diann, describe your first experience understanding race. When did you first realize that race plays an essential role in the way we experience life and interact with society?
it's a hard question. It's one I think about quite often. I actually think for me, the first time I truly understood race, it could be two times, and both for me are revolving around school. I still remember being 5 and sitting in the principal's office and hearing my mother explain to this principal why her baby needed to get a variance to this school that was in a very nice area of Brooklyn. And it was not like the area I was raised in, and the school was not like the school, my public schools in my area. I obviously at that point did not realize, because I had not been admitted to the school till later, that that was probably one of my first kind of relationships with race, and seeing the impact of race. I would say I was much older in middle school, and I had a sister who has had a lifelong challenge with substance abuse. And by middle school, I was in a private independent school. I was one of the few Black girls in my grade. And my best friend also had a sibling who had a problem with substance abuse. And it really clicked to me, like differences in race, when I saw how they both were traversing this same challenge, how society was responding to them, how they had gotten into it, what it meant for their lives and their trajectories. So I would say it probably was middle school for me, and seeing that difference in treatment with folks in the same situation.
Justin, you can lead it off for us, and then, Andrew, and then Trey. Describe your first experience understanding race.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. For me, it started just when I was pretty much like a young kid, like kind of the first memories that you recall when you're really young. And the reason being is just because I grew up in a biracial household. My mom is white and my dad is Black. And so I can remember hanging out with two groups of friends and never feeling like I fit in either way. I was always too Black hanging out with my white friends, and I was always too white hanging out with my Black friends. And there always seemed to be some type of turmoil in those relationships, and felt like there was always like a battle within myself of like I had to like pick. I couldn't just be friends with my friends. I had to just pick a side. And that was just kind of like my first experience with race, just, growing up in South Florida, and a lot of conversations, deep conversations with my dad, just being a Black man in America, and a lot of conversations with my mom, being with a Black man in America. And I remember having tough conversations, being the oldest of I have 2 younger brothers, so being the oldest of 3, and having tough conversations, having to learn how to lead in conversations with them about race and what it's like dealing, being a biracial kid. And so that was like my first, experience. I can remember it vividly. Everything else, you tend to forget, but those things are kind of etched in the back of your brain. So those are my first experience with race in that regard.
Andrew, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really one of those things. I think in different stages of life, I noticed it, differently. I would say that when I was a young kid, my mother actually was a school teacher. And so I got an opportunity that where we actually lived, she didn't teach at my school, and it was always confusing to me. And for her, she's somebody that really was instrumental in my life in teaching me about the differences in race, and really things that were going on around me that maybe as a young kid you never take notice of. And she actually taught at a school that was a predominantly Black students and in a pretty rough economic area. And she would never leave that school because it meant so much to her to be there. And she saw a lot of the things that were inequalities, and made a difference to her to understand that she was needed to be there. And so I got to grow up going to her school and being a part of her school. And realizing the differences in the school that I went to as a young kid at first, and then where she taught. And so those things started to make me aware of it. And then as I grew up in high school and the junior high and all those things, to realize the differences where I grew up in North Louisiana, in a place where, our high school mascot was the Rebels, and it was a Confederate flag that people flew. And I would be like, man, I don't understand this because this is offensive. But no one around me, whether they're white, whether they're black, whether anything, says anything about it. And it's because it's just kind of like, it's for both sides. It's either pushed on the other side, or it's like they don't know how to handle it if they spoke up and said, we're offended by this. And so it was one of those things, watching as a young kid, I didn't understand. And then it really took until I got to college and had a lot of teammates that I became extremely close with that were young black men, and just like I was a young white man trying to figure out the world and everything else. And a lot of those relationships that I developed in college have really been the essential of what kicked me off when I got into the NFL to want to make a difference and to want to be a part of the solution, because I got to learn and have empathy and understanding for how some people grew up different than me, and their experience and what it was like, and the hardships that they may have had that I would have never even thought about. Those things are continued life lessons from those guys, and it's something to me that I really I'm thankful for those relationships, because they put me in a position to try and be there for people that I feel the best thing I can do is to fight for and to be behind in every way possible.
And Trey, how about you? What was your first experience with race?
Obviously, I'm from Alabama, and the area I'm at, is obviously, predominantly black, so I didn't really notice it much in a young age, because, people that looked like me was the majority. But as my brothers play high school ball, and of course we had to go to the surrounding areas, and a lot of those surrounding areas were, it wasn't fit for, people of color. So, we would go down to these football games, and, my dad would go down, and, we'll go down as a family, really, and just, we could kind of sense, obviously, you play the game, and the referees calling this way, the opposing team fans are reacting this way, saying these type of things. And at them moments, that's when I kind of realized, okay, that's where I really kind of experienced it and really saw it for what it was. Obviously, I had friends, or I had people who I hung out with who were different color, but I didn't know that it was as far as a barrier, or of just communication, or just socially, between us, or that one color disliked the other color, until we went down into those areas in Alabama that was kind of, they kind of showed themselves for what it was.
I love these answers because each of you had different experiences with it. And I think that just represents our country as a whole. And the three of you are each of your team's nominees for the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award. As we mentioned earlier, the most prestigious honor in the NFL, given for outstanding community service. And you all focus a portion of your off the field work on issues of racial equity and social justice. Talk about what that honor means to you, how you're addressing these issues, and the change you're seeking to create in your communities. Andrew, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's an extreme honor to be selected. Obviously, I've had the blessing, really humbly, to be selected multiple times in my career, and to me, it's one of the greatest parts of playing this game is to have the opportunity to make a difference outside of football. The platform we have and the chance we have as athletes, really to make a difference in this country and how people do things. Is something I don't take lightly. So for me, yeah, I mean, it's an extreme honor. It's something that's really important to me. I think that for me, it's hard sometimes to peg the one lane that I feel like I can make the most difference, but I try to be there to have open ears and listen and figure out different ways, whether it's through, early childhood education, whether it's through policy change, whether it's through, people who are hurting, from homelessness and different things, all the different ways that you really can look out, at people that need and people that are out there looking for some way for someone to give them just a positive kick and just to say, hey, I believe you, I love you, and I'm here to support you. I think there's so many different things. And that's why I think to me, it's when you look across the league, one of the greatest honors I have when I get selected is to look at all 32 teams, read about the guys and read their story and what it is they're doing. Because I think one of the greatest ways you can learn is from people around you and your peers, and to learn some of the things they're doing. And maybe that gives you an idea, or maybe that gives you a philosophy that you think you could carry forward. I just think it's unique every year, and it's just such an honor to read some of the things people are doing. And it also is humbling, because sometimes I'm like, man, I can't believe that this guy's getting this done in a different state and city, and the way they're doing it. So I think it's been one of the things that's the most gratifying for my career is having the opportunity to be a part of this nominee list.
I couldn't agree more with what Andrew was saying. I think it's obviously it's a tremendous honor being a part of, a list like the Walter Payton Man of the Year. Even just being a nominee in and of itself, I think just speaks volumes to, the type of character guys that you're in conversation with, guys like Trey, guys like Andrew. And so it's been a tremendous honor. This is my second time being nominated. It's just been a tremendous honor doing that. And I think this year's been a little bit more special, than last year's, just because of, all the craziness in our society and our world that we've kind of seen unfold. It's been a truth for a lot of our, the minority of our community for 400 plus years. But I think we're finally starting to see via social media and all these other things. I think we're finally starting to see as a country, like how this has impacted a community of people for, like I just said, for 400 plus years. And this year I was just really thankful because I had the opportunity to work with the Boys and Girls Club and actually RISE through like a multi-week program. And we talked about all those things with, with high schoolers, middle school, like kids, that about just what's going on in our country. How does it impact you? And if we could record and send out those videos to America, I know it would break so many people's hearts, just hearing like what these kids are taking in and what they're seeing and how they're reacting to it and what they're saying on these calls. And I'll never forget, we were having the conversation and one kid just like stopped one of the mediators, commentators on the call and was like, why do you care now? Like, this has been something that's going on for my parents' lives and their grandparents' lives. So like, why do you act like you care now? Right. And that was a kid. And it was just like heartbreaking to hear that, and feel like they're not going to have any help, or like they're on their own and they have to figure it out on their own. And that's why I like doing what I'm doing. It's not necessarily me being a great person, but it's just recognizing that I have a platform that these kids can use, right? Through me being able to bring networks to visit with the Boys and Girls Club so that they can speak out and speak up on things that they're experiencing in their own neighborhoods and things like that. And I'm just really proud of those kids, man, at the Denver Boys and Girls Club, because it's been an honor to get to know them, know their hearts, and know their passion to want to make better change for their communities. And so they're, this year they were really the driving force behind, just me wanting to be able to speak up, about all the different things that are happening in our world. So
we're going to talk a little bit more about the Boys and Girls Club later on, but Trey, Justin said it, he felt as though this award was even more special this year. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, I definitely would agree with that. Getting this nomination is kind of like, regardless of win or not, I put in the category that I already won just being nominated, because the type of guys that were in the locker room that I'm in, and for me to be one of the ones to represent, you had, this spring we had unbelievable conversations, and it was a lot of guys opening up, a lot of tears coming, a lot of guys just saying things that they probably haven't told anyone else. And it brought awareness just in that small community, or that small locker room. And and that's just a symbolism of how we can come together outside in the world, and as a world, as a nation, and just share our stories, just express our point of view, share our stories, talk, come to an understanding, even if it's not in agreement. You could just see it from a different lens, see it from a different perspective. And and it's just special for me to represent those guys. And like I said, just from already winning, a kid that I talked to probably, last year around this time or sometime in the summer or sometime, a few weeks ago, can see that a guy that was literally standing in front of him, telling them that they can be whatever they want to be, giving them hope, giving them inspiration, and seeing this guy be, nominated for this type of award is definitely an honor, definitely a blessing.
Andrew, you mentioned one of the issues you focus on is inequity in education. You funded STEM labs at an elementary school in Watts and a middle school in Boyle Heights in the LA area to help close that technology gap for low-income students. Unfortunately, the pandemic has heightened that digital divide and many of the racial inequities that exist in our education system. So what more needs to be done to bridge those gaps?
Well, I think it's just, honestly, it's continuing to find ways to create policy, to create funding. All these things really can go back to, a lot of different things, but economics is one of the major ones. And the fact that you really look at the history of things and how this country was done. I mean, there was a lot of situations where people that had similar colored skin to myself were at an advantage, and we're given policies, we're given funding, we're giving things through banks, everything else, mortgages, you name it, in a different standard than what other people that may look different than them were. And so I think that the real opportunity to continue to make sure that we change policy, we change the economic situation, but also that means that in early childhood development and kids in junior highs and high schools, we increase their opportunity for education in every community and not just certain communities. And so anything that I feel like, for me, it's been one of those opportunities where I get a chance when I moved to LA to go to different communities and see how much disparity there is, and say, all right, well, what's one way that right now we could make some significant change? And we started with STEM labs. We're continuing to build some more. I think it's something that's really important to me. And I think, honestly, it's just finding your window. As I told our guys when we'd have these meetings and we'd have these great talks that Trey talked about, I mean, I think the same thing with us and in the Rams locker room. I mean, one of the greatest parts that's come from this year is conversation. And you realize how important communication is in families, in relationships, and it's just as important in people. And so having communication and conversation about what needs to be done. And I would always tell our guys, like, hey, look, just find the lane you want to run in and find what it is that you want to make a difference in, and just go dominate that lane. Like if whatever it is, inequality and social justice and any kind of being in the community and making a difference that you want to do, just find it, do it, trust that that's what your heart is behind, and go dominate that lane and be great at it. And each one of us find that way. You know what, we'll take the same little steps that were maybe given to another group of people based off their skin color, and we'll take our little steps in the right direction. And if all of us are doing that, we'll make a significant change together.
Well, as a mom of 3 boys, I absolutely love that. And Justin, you're passionate in working with teenagers, and maybe a lot of that has to be being an older brother. Part of your work in the community included a partnership with the Denver Broncos. You mentioned it, the Boys and Girls Club, where you took part in a RISE multi-week leadership program with local teens. Talk about those important conversations you had there, the bond you built with those teens, and why it's so important to engage young people on being leaders on these issues.
Yeah, it was that was a once in a lifetime experience, being able to talk with those kids. And I think the main point to hit on that was just like, they're a lot of those kids are in it, right? They're part of the Boys and Girls Club. Mom or dad, or just mom or just dad have to work multiple shifts at different jobs just to make sure that their kids are getting the type of childhood that they probably didn't have, or things in that nature. And so having those conversations with those kids, being in the NFL and kind of just growing up in my life, you sometimes tend to forget like your roots and where you're from, and just like the conversations that you had when you were a kid, or things in that nature. And just having those conversations with them kind of brought me back to that reality, and was like, man, I remember I used to think like that, or I had a friend that thought like that. And thinking about where he is now, and I'm just looking at this kid thinking about a friend that I had, and just all those different conversations, man. I mean, having those conversations with them was unbelievable. And I think the biggest thing to take away from the whole thing is like, those kids are going to be our future. There's no stopping that. Our youth is our future. And that's why I'm so passionate about educating and listening to them is because they have, it's not like they don't know. They know what's going on. They understand it perfectly fine. And it's not, a lot of these kids, not like they're hostile. They just want better for not only themselves, but for their friends, their communities. Like they just want better. And it's because of them, being able to speak up and speak out on so many things that have been going on. It's because of them that, I kind of pushed myself and a couple of our teammates to have conversations with our governor in Colorado about clemency and exercising his clemency powers and things of that nature. And, I'm really just proud of them because at the end of our conversation, they were talking about how they're going to have a march and a peaceful protest in Denver that they're organizing, by themselves, and that they're going to lead it. And it was just really powerful to hear them talk about, they want to do it peacefully. They want these points to be hit, here are the things that they want to accomplish in doing it. And they said that they're going to do it in April. And so it's just cool, man, being a part of a conversation like that with those kids. And I know for a lot of people, you're thinking that like maybe that agenda is pushed on them, but they just came up with all that, themselves and listening to that conversation. And it was beautiful being a part of that. And I was really fortunate and blessed to be a part of that conversation with them.
Wow, that is incredible. And it just shows right now, all of your stories, each of you have different passions. And Trey, you've been really engaged, I know, on COVID relief this past year, but also focused your efforts on voter education and civic engagement. You shared in a virtual town hall event with the Lions and RISE leading up to the election last year that voting was a real personal issue for you and your family growing up in Alabama. Tell us why that is and why you feel it's important for you to help empower others to be civically engaged.
The march on the also known as Bloody Sunday in 1965, my grandparents, well, my mother on my mom's side and my grandfather on my dad's side and my uncle as well, they were a part of that march. They, my grandfather and my uncle marched in it, and my grandmother, she was, kind of giving the water and giving people rides to and fro from the march. So just being that close, being that, having family members that were a part of that movement, it definitely, since me and a lot of my relatives were able to vote, it always been a thing to make sure we register to vote, make sure we let our voices heard. So ever since then, just hearing the stories, my father just kind of re-preaching it, re-teaching it every election coming around to make sure our voices are heard, it just kind of was instilled into my mind. So with the election coming up, the past election coming up, obviously, I had a individual story, an individual perspective to why, I pushed voting, or I was, an advocate of voting so much. So, I just, dealing with those town hall meetings, those Zoom meetings, things like that, I just, wanted my voice to be heard. Just wanted everyone to understand the importance of letting your voice to be heard. So, and it was a big election, obviously, with 2020 coming with what it came with. I think a lot of people understood that a change had to come. And one of the first steps in change is voting. So, and as you see, when we all come together, when we all let our voices be heard, we can create change. We can, allow whatever we want to happen. So it's just one of those things that for me, growing up, obviously having that personal relationship, personal experience in it, and, just wanted to shed light on how important it was to let your voice be heard as a citizen. So.
Well, you led me right into my next question, because this past year, our nation experienced a real reckoning on race, and we saw athletes use their voices to speak out against racism and injustice like never before. How did the events of the past year cause you guys to consider what role you have as an athlete and how you can really inspire change?
Well, I think that, like I said, I think those conversations and that communication has really opened a lot of guys' eyes. I mean, I think a lot of, you in locker rooms, there's a lot of things that maybe just kind of assumed, and some guys try to just understand about each other, but really never talked about. And I think that, some of these things that went on in our country caused conversation. They caused locker rooms to sit together and say, hey, this is my experience. This is what I've been through. And I think that really for me, it really didn't change things for me. It maybe reinvigorated some of the passions I've always had, and made me more committed even to watch some of the young guys on my team voice where they're at with it, and just hear some new perspective and different guys that maybe you never had a deep conversation with on your team. You just kind of assumed they were a young guy, or they were this player, and and you kind of your hierarchy in the NFL, and so you don't really talk that much to them or whatever, but you just kind of encourage them as a teammate. And then all of a sudden you hear their perspective on life or something they've been through, and it's eye-opening to you, like some wisdom you just gained from this 23-year-old who's been through something different than what you've been through, and seen something different than you've seen. So for me, I think those conversations at the end of the day are going to be extremely powerful, because in my opinion, we play the world's greatest sport, and it's one of the most influential sports in the world, and as well. And so, you know what, I think you've seen in different communities that NFL cities are in, the impact that we've already had. You've already seen how much uproar there is, and just things like the flag, and whether guys stand and whether guys kneel and all these things. You look at how powerful that is. And I think it's like, hey, let's make that less the issue and more about, look how much power we have and how much change we can cause. And that's how powerful we can be if we all work together and we all have the same passion to pull for one another and help each other along the way. And so I really think this year is going to be something we're going to see 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, a dramatic change in the way the athlete is seen, and the power and ability we have to cause change, and honestly promote positive things in each of our communities. I look forward to watching guys continue to carry this torch and keep moving it forward.
I think the conversations that have kind of accumulated since this previous spring and summer have just been so crucial to just the fight in total of racial inequalities and social injustices in America. And I think while those conversations are great, everyone always says the saying of actions are louder than words. And I think you look back on a couple of years ago when Colin took a knee and there was so much uproar and maybe not a lot of backing, just from the league and that standpoint. And then now you kind of look at the growth that we've had as a league, right? Like, now that they're letting players able to speak out a little bit more, they're promoting social media platforms to be able to have conversations, one-on-one with analysts that are streaming live on, the NFL social media websites. We're having conversations like this now, where, we're talking with CBS and things in that nature. And I think, the sacrifices that some of the guys made, right? Like Colin, like, Kenny Stills or Eric Reed or, Michael Thomas with the Texans. I think you look at those types of things and it inspired guys like myself, right? I see that when I was a young guy in the league, and it's like, okay, I want to know exactly what they're talking about. Oh yeah, I've experienced these things, or I know friends that have experienced these things. I agree with that. I want to be able to, to do my part. I want to be able to stand on my truths and be able to speak out on that. And I just think all those things have been great, seeing those things grow over the last couple of years. And like Andrew said, I think moving forward too, I'm just excited to see like next steps for us in terms of what is to come, and I think that's going to be the best thing is, we just continually keep growing. We may not beat this thing, and, it's not an overnight deal, and there's not like one, thing that's going to change, all of the things that are systematically set up to have our minority communities fail. But I think in growing these things each and every year, each and every month, each and every day, I think you'll see tremendous progress, and just thankful for, the platform to be able to speak out on those things. And I just can't wait to see what more changes there are to come.
I can't wait either. And Trey, let's talk about what was happening in your locker room after the shooting of Jacob Blake last August in Kenosha, Wisconsin. The sports world remembers the Milwaukee Bucks and Orlando Magic refusing to play in an NBA playoff game, and the bold statements and actions taken by the WNBA players. But it was your organization, the Detroit Lions, that was the first team to decide You were not going to practice after a video of Blake's shooting was released. Instead, your team spent the time talking about social justice and issues and told reporters you would no longer stay silent. You played a leading role in those conversations in that locker room. Could you tell us what went into that team decision, and what are some of the next steps your team is taking to continue that conversation to make real change?
Before we kind of came and sat into the meeting room, like a normal day. And, for a guy like me, or probably majority of NFL players, the Black athletes, you kind of see something go on social media and you just go on about your day. You think, okay, it is what it is. They killed another one of us. You kind of just go on about it. But and what it kind of touched me is when Coach came in, he told us to get out of our seats. We circled up in the middle of the field and we just had conversation. And in that conversation, obviously you had many guys telling stories about, their point of views, their, like I said, stories that they probably haven't told anyone else. And, it kind of touched me because, like I said, I saw the shooting, I saw the Instagram, and I just, kept scrolling. But it's just the simple fact that it shouldn't be that comfortable, and you shouldn't just keep scrolling. It shouldn't be that frequent to where, okay, it's just another day. And so I think that sparked a lot of conversation. And then after, we probably sat there probably hour or so, just, it was a lot of tears, a lot of emotion, a lot of point of views. And, we kind of went back in the locker room, and obviously we continued the conversation just as players. All the coaches and everybody was in the circle, but when we went in the locker room as players, we try to come up to, all right, what's next? What we gonna do next? Like, and many players, like I said, came with a lot of, great answers, a lot of great things to do. And, we just came up with the fact that, okay, we can't be sad. We gotta let the world know. We gotta, make a big impact on, if this is what we want to speak on. So that demonstration that you saw was just kind of, it was, emotion behind it. It was perspective behind it. It was, real genuine behind it. And it was just a genuine act to say, like, okay, the world shouldn't go on.
I absolutely love how your organizations all really got behind everything. And I can only imagine the bonding, the effect it had in a locker room. And you talked about getting the ball rolling, Trey. Well, let's talk about next steps. And Diann, I want to bring you back in here. RISE has worked with all three of your organizations, as we've mentioned. From your perspective, though, what steps do sports organizations need to take in order to effectively address issues of racism and inequity in the communities going forward?
Next steps has to be long-term and intentional. To me, this group here is A-list because in many ways they represent each of them, I think, parts of what's next. For each of them, it was intentional and it was authentic. Each of them did what was right for them, what was moved for them. One of the things RISE focuses on is we're going to be about mission and we're not going to be about marketing. And so the three of them, again, the three of you guys, while you're big names, you really did what moves you, what matters to you, and that's where the impact is coming from. And so long-term intentional actions for RISE, in some ways, I think Justin has really described one of our long-term intentional ways better than I can. We do multi-week programming with two of the teams, with both the Rams. We do RISE with the Rams, and we did the leadership program with the Denver Broncos. And to Justin's point, it has been amazing this year. We think that is that education at every level, that bringing folks together intentionally and explicitly addressing race has to be a part of what is next. The other thing I will say that is next is that leadership has to remember that leadership matters. I have not had the opportunity, but I'm going to say it now to Andrew. Andrew was amazing. The LA Rams had a town hall with their entire organization. And I mean the entire organization. And so when I logged on to that call, seriously, to see Andrew, to see Kevin, to see Coach McVay, to see Les Snead, it matters that leadership is having these conversations. It matters that leadership is being intentional. A next step has to be for us that if folks are going to lead, they have to be a part of this conversation. They have to say, like Trey just said about his coach, that they make it a priority. I think that's what it's going to take for our country to continue to move forward. And I do believe we're moving forward. I'm optimistic. And then the third thing I would say is remembering we need leadership from all sectors. I have been actually impressed this year with how corporate America has stepped up. I think especially as we look in this football space, when we look at the Washington football team, my dad is from the DMV area. It is a historical moment that we call that team the Washington football team. And a lot of that sprang from corporate America stepping up. RISE has had the opportunity this year. I am so excited to partner with Pepsi and have people in the corporate space understanding we don't get to the point of being able to staff up and have the community conversation where Trey shared and move so many people to get registered and vote, and not just in Michigan, but the impact of that community conversation with the Lions was national. We don't get to the point of having those programs that Justin took part in, and we don't get to the point of having enough people work at RISE so we can stay up for town halls if we don't have corporate America and folks with funds really stepping up and saying, we're gonna fund that, we're gonna push that work, we're gonna play our part. And so obviously, I think there are a lot of next steps, but I think those three, long-term intentional actions, leadership stepping up, in all parts of our society, including corporate America, continuing to step up.
I agree with you 100%, Diane. And I ask all of you now, how can people without a platform of a professional athlete like you guys, young people, how can everyone move this conversation forward in their own communities? What actions can they take to create change? Just give us some examples or some advice for those that are watching today. And Justin, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. What I've always shared with our youth, kind of like at the Boys and Girls Club, or really anyone we talk to, is exactly what Andrew said earlier. May have phrased it differently, but just whatever you feel passionate about, whatever you feel like is tugging at your heart the most, like attack it and just dominate. That specific subject of what you deem is important to yourself. And I think that's really important. I think educating yourself is just as important, like educating yourself on some things that are voted on by the community, right? If you go to certain polls where, things are going to be passed in your community that either go one way or the other, right? Like being educated, like go to those things. Like I think a lot of the times, and I mean, myself included, like really trying to educate myself more when you're going to, like town hall meetings or whatever the case may be. Like there's bills that are being passed that are voted on by your communities, and that a lot of communities have say in, certain things that are going to be passed in your society and in your neighborhood. And I think educating yourself on those things, showing up, like Trey said, that's the importance of voting, right? Showing up, voting, making sure your voice is being heard. And it's just really important, like really understanding who you're putting in positions of power, whether that be governor or things like that, like really thinking about who you're putting in position of power to kind of what's going to help or hurt, you as a society and as a community. And I think those are all the things that are important. That's what I share, with all the kids there at the Boys and Girls Club and in our communities at Denver.
Justin, I love what you said, and you're spoken like a true athlete. Attack and dominate. Those are some really great words. Trey, what actions do you think others can take to create change?
You know, a lot of players, coaches, they kind of realize that, okay, it may be some things that they let pass that they should have maybe addressed. Meaning, you know, if you're at a barbecue or you're hanging out with your friends and, you know, it's things being said, ideas being thrown around, a joke being thrown around, and it wasn't addressed. Like it was ha ha, you laugh about it. And, you know, I think that's one step that, you know, just anybody, you know, even if, and like, you know, Justin and Andrew said, like, it's a lane for everyone, you know, and in one lane you got voting, in one lane you got, you know, going, visiting town hall meetings, in one lane you got this, but, you know, a simple lane to where right there in your own home and neighborhood or your group of friends, you can just share a perspective. And it's kind of like, okay, you see something, if you hear something that's probably wasn't right, or probably, you know, it wouldn't be said around a particular group, then, you know, you educate them. And I think just giving that knowledge, giving that, you know, that knowledge of a different perspective is what anybody can do.
Yep, you're exactly right. Just have a conversation. Andrew, why don't you wrap it up for us and give us your advice on to how others can get involved to make change that might not have the big platform that you guys have?
Yeah, I think it's really what you know, Justin and Trey both touched on. I mean, to me, it's like you really look at things. It's like there's a lot of things in this country that we've assumed and we've taken for granted. And I think it's really learning to be about the action of really a couple of things to me, and that is it's learning how to have empathy and understand where people come from. All of us come from different places, different backgrounds, have different experiences. So have empathy for the people around you, and maybe understanding their point of view. You don't have to always agree together, but you can be empathetic to their points and be empathetic to what they've experienced. There's educating. I mean, educate yourself, educate the people that are in your household. As I told our guys on that call, Dan talked about, is that it was important to me that when I sit at the dinner table with my 4 kids and my wife, that we have those conversations and that they understand where we as a family stand on this and what's important to us in our hearts and who we are. And so to me, it's really about empathy. It's about education. It's about communication and conversation. And lastly, it's about accountability. And so it's you finding a way to be empathetic, to educate yourself, educate those around you in your household and your circle, so that it may influence somebody else's circle. Having the communication and conversations that you can understand each other, know where each other's coming from, hear stories that maybe you've never heard before, and really create dialogue that continues to just multiply itself into other circles, other groups of people where they're having those conversations, and then holding people accountable. It's our leaders. It's the people that are in positions that they said they were going to office to do this for us, so they said they were going to be about these things, holding them accountable to that, and making sure that no different than myself playing left tackle or Trey rushing the passer or Justin playing safety, we have a job to do. And we signed up to do a job, and that's our responsibility. Hold our leaders accountable to their job and the responsibility they have to lead people in the right way.
Well said. And I've absolutely loved this conversation. Thank you guys, Diahann, Justin, Andrew, Trey, for participating in RISE's 6th annual Super Bowl Critical Conversation. To learn more, please go to risetowin.org.